I want to ask you 3 questions. Just 3 questions that you can think about. Number 1, do my daily actions align with my core values and long-term goals? Number 2, are you making conscious choices or are you merely reacting to your circumstances? Number 3, am I present in each moment or am I merely going through the motions? The aim of this podcast is to encourage you. The aim of this podcast is to let you know that you have a lot more power, regardless of what your circumstances are. The choices and decisions and how you react to the circumstances are yours. The mindset that you have is what's going to determine the life that you have. Have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions? Like you're not really living, you're just existing. You wake up, it feels like Groundhog Day, you go through the same thing over and over and over again. If so, you're not alone. A lot of people feel this way. I've had a lot of conversations in the last couple of months about this particular feeling. That's why I decided today to move away from my normal format and have a conversation about living a life of intentionality. Welcome to a different episode of Everyday Leadership. The world we're living in is a very different place than it was a couple of years ago when we just had COVID. We are facing new challenges. You got climate change crisis, you got economic disparity, you got political disparity. I mean, we had how many prime ministers in a very short space of time, let alone the cost of living crisis, layoffs, hybrid and remote working, you name it, it's happening around us. There is so much change. Nothing seems to stay the same. And what that can do is it can create this sense of powerlessness, which is a word a lot of people have used to describe this state of how they feel. Now, that state of powerlessness, you can get the words out of my mouth, can actually create a lot of anxiety. Uncertainty normally creates anxiety. And it is very hard and can be very hard, shall I say, and difficult to cope with uncertainty because you just don't have a sense of control. You feel like you don't have a very firm foundation that you can put your foot on. Once you think you've got something figured out, something shifts underneath you, and all of a sudden, everything's all gone. But it doesn't actually have to be that way. Living a life of intentionality makes a difference. Living a life of intentionality gives you your power back. Living a life of intentionality aligns your values, the way that you want to show up, aligns who you are with who you want to be. Because a lot of times they are out of whack, believe it or not. That's part of the reason why you feel the way you do. Who you are and how you want to be, how you want to show up are not always aligned, but they can be. So let me just kind of peel things back a little bit. I know you've heard the phrase before time and time again. Live a life of intention, live a life of intention, live a life of intention. It just sounds over and over and over again. But what does that actually really mean? It means consciously aligning your everyday actions with our deepest values and our deepest goals. It's about making choices that resonate with your authentic self rather than drifting along in life's currents. I phrase it as living from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Because when I live from the inside out, it is not about my external world. It is not about external factors. It's about what's inside of me. And that is solid. That is where I have my power. That is where I have my authority, my gifts, my talents, my experiences. Regardless of what's happening around me, all those things cannot be taken away from you. However, a lot of times we do not tap into that side of things. It's the external that we lean into more. And that's why we feel so powerless. That's why when things change around us, the uncertainty changes and creates this void, and this void creates chaos. One of my quotes I really, really like, because it speaks to me as an individual, but also speaks to a lot of the work I do. It's your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. It's a cliche quote, but it's really true, because what you believe and what you think about, the words that you say to yourself, that's the actions that you take. I remember very long time ago. My daughter's now 14. Just before she was born, I was working in London and I wanted to come back home. I was tired of being away from my family. It was still throughout the recession, so there were not a lot of jobs available locally. But I was like, I want to come back home. I want to come back home. I want to come back home. But just didn't want to come back home and work. I had this list that I wanted for my next employee. At a point in time, I was doing my CMOS, so I wanted them to pay for it. I wanted to be able to take time off to go to my classes and not use it in my holiday. I wanted it to be within 10 miles of where we lived. I had like 5 of these, I was just 3 I've given you, of these things written down. Now, bearing in mind, we're still in a recession. Actually, we weren't coming out of it. I think we just had like a year left. So it was really tough to get a job normally, let alone having the recession element. And I had a criteria because for me, it was very, very important. I just didn't want to come back home. I wanted to come back home and be intentional about where I worked and what that provided for me. Now, I'm not saying that once you have an intention, that always comes to pass, but it helps because then you are defining what you want. I could have leaned into the fact and said that actually any job is good enough because I'll be back home. That removed a lot of my power. No, I still had some ownership. I still had some ownership, and I was intentional. I did end up getting a job, and the job ticked every single box I wanted. For me, that was God. That was faith, that was walking in obedience, but it was me also being intentional. I had so many other people. In fact, there was one person I worked with in my old place. And when I came in there, she was like, oh yeah, I want to do my CMO as well because I want to become an accountant. I want to do blah, 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 blah. And I asked her, how long have you been saying this? She said 6 years. I was there for a year. I left there. She was there for 7 years. She still hadn't made a move yet. There's a difference between saying something and doing something about it. That's what living a life of intentionality is about. Zig Ziglar used to have this phrase where he talked about being a wandering generality versus a meaningful specific. Basically what that says is we can either react to our life or we can shape our life. But a lot of people in this day and age run on autopilot. And therefore you end up replicating the patterns and the behaviors without questioning yourself. Is what I'm doing truly serving me? Is what I'm doing truly aligned to the life and the values that I have? In fact, we can easily find ourselves moaning and complaining about things, yet we don't change it. I'll never forget the parable that I heard, and it was this man was walking past this house every single day, and every time he walked past, he would hear the dog moaning and complaining. And one day he finally had enough of it. I went to the 2 people on the porch. Why does your dog keep on moaning? Is he okay? Do you want to take him to the vet? I know you guys are old. I can help you do that because I just don't like hearing the sound. It sounds like he's in pain. And they turned around to him and they said, he's in pain. He's lying down a nail. So it's like, why don't you just move him or move the nail? They said, we've moved him multiple times. He keeps on going back to that spot and making noise. Some people are just addicted to complaining. And it's a fact. If you want to live a life of intention, it's not about just moaning and complaining about how things are. It's not just about moaning and complaining about how you don't have any power. It is about taking actions which are going to lead? Can't speak properly. Lead to the life that you want to have. That is the difference of living with intention. Imagine this for a minute. You are at sea and you're a ship at sea. And if you live without intention, it's like being a ship without a rudder. You're at the mercy of the winds and the waves and all the different elements because you cannot steer your own course. You have absolutely no control. There is no rudder there. Therefore, whatever the winner decides is whatever you're going to do. On the other hand, living with intention, you have a compass on that ship. It's not a fixed map, but you know where direction you're going to. And therefore, you can adjust and choose your destination. You can adjust the sails according to the wind. You see that? You don't have control. The wind, the waves are still there. They're still moving back and forth. But you can adjust your sails because you have a lot more control. That's what living with intention looks like. And I mentioned right at the start, we live in a time where things are very uncertain. We live in a time where people don't even know how they're going to be able to pay their bills because of the economic crisis. We live in a time where we've had the highest amount of layoffs, especially in the tech industry, and that creates some instability. Those are things that you have no decision and no choice over. I recognize that fact. I've been in there. I understand it. So this is not just something I'm saying hypothetically. I understand it from a practical perspective. But also recognize the fact that actually you still have control in those environments. Because if you have been laid off, it's a chance for you to reset. It's a chance for you to rethink around what environment do I want to go into, what industry I want to go into, what's available for me out there. Are there things that I always wanted to do, but I've been scared to do, and now I've got an opportunity to step into that. For other people, it is that stress of, oh my gosh, I need to provide for my family. Now I don't have a plan. It can be very overwhelming. Again, speaking from experience of being a breadwinner, not having a job, being fired. I wasn't laid off. I was fired, so I had no severance pay whatsoever. And it was just down to the environment I worked with at that point in time. And some of us came in one day, they kind of put us to the left and they fired us all. Yes, it was very cold and very brutal. I understand what that pressure can feel like on your shoulders. I understand what that weight can feel like on your shoulders. But also recognize that actually how I got through that period was by being very intentional. When I leaned into the stress and the anxiety and uncertainty and the powerlessness and the anger and the frustration, it really helped me and move me forward. When I recognized the fact that actually there are things that I can do, I was a lot more intentional. It started to change and shape my life, my world, my experience. So I want to ask you 3 questions. Just 3 questions that you can think about. Number 1, do my daily actions align with my core values and long-term goals? Now, this question is created to help you to reflect on whether your daily behavior and decisions are in harmony with what you value the most and the goals you set for your life. You might say, I want to exercise. Are you getting up at a particular time that allows you to be able to exercise? Or are you coming home at a particular time that allows you to exercise? Are you going straight from work to the gym so you don't come home because you have no excuse? Are you eating healthier? Are you doing the things that align to your goal? Example I gave earlier on, I said I had a list of criteria that I wanted for a role. My daily actions were looking for jobs that allowed me to be able to do that. In fact, some of the roles I applied for did not have every single thing, but I had my non-negotiables. Out of those 5 things, I had the 3 which I mentioned before, the non-negotiables. That organization I ended up working with, they had 2 of them. But I said, let me go in and ask the 3rd because they really liked me that much, so give them that 3rd, and they did. Again, you never know. But I started off by having my list first, and then started to wield organizations down, and then that created that space and place for me. My daily actions were aligned with my long-term goals of what I needed and what I wanted in life. Number 2, are you making conscious choices or are you merely reacting to your circumstances? I'm asking you, I'm encouraging you to assess whether you're proactively shaping your life through conscious decision-making or whether you're passively reacting to whatever life throws at you. You have a lot more control of your life if only you make that choice to have the control. If you don't, life is going to happen to you. Choice is going to be made on your behalf. Change is going to happen regardless. The only question is, are you choosing to take hold of that rudder or are you completely letting it go? Do you even find yourself moaning and complaining about scenarios and situations, and when you can do something about it, you don't? What's going on there? What's that fear that might be holding you back that you need to explore a little bit more? I remember working with a number of clients over the year, but one particular stood out to me. She talked about how, I don't really like this job. It's a great role. I've been here for years. I'm good at what I do, blah, 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 but I'm just not satisfied. So I got her to do this exercise. I said, write down what your perfect day, week, and month will look like. At first she's like, what am I going to do this for? This is never going to happen. It's like, just take your time and write it down. And then we spent some time helping her to have a mindset shift around what potentially she could move into, around what action she was taking around the lifestyle that she actually wanted. And we also were able to anchor who she wanted to be based on what she'd written down for that perfect day, week, and month to how she was showing up right now. She did eventually move, but when she moved, and here's what I want to use as an example, she knew what she was moving into. She knew what life she was creating, and she was constantly moving and pushing towards that because that was something that could drive her forward. That's a different way of thinking about things. Rather than just focusing on the then, the now, which was miserable, which was horrible, she was able to look at a future state that she wanted to be in and then take actions that moved her from here to there. If she didn't have a future state, nothing would have driven her forward. There was nothing I could have said that would have driven her forward. Are you making conscious choices, or are you just reacting to your circumstances? Her reacting to her circumstances was moaning and complaining and being happy. However, I always say to her, you didn't make one conscious choice. You chose to hire an executive coach. Because something there that you knew that you couldn't do by yourself, and there's something there that you knew you wanted to change. So that was a choice. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit for even the small, subtle decisions that we make that are aligned to where we want to be. So as you're thinking about this, are there small, subtle choices that indications to you that actually I'm doing something? And you just need to lean further into that to open up even more. Number 3, am I present in each moment, or am I merely going through the motions? I want you to consider whether you're truly engaged and present in your daily activities and interactions, or whether you're just on autopilot. You're not experiencing life. It's just happening around you. Wake up in the morning, you put your clothes on. You might go into a work building, you might go to your study, your library, your table, work from there, have lunch at 1, stop, get back to your desk, you do that, put on the TV, you watch some TV, you go to bed, and you start over again. That does sound really, really boring, doesn't it? Yeah. Are you wake up in the morning, yay, I'm alive. In my case, wake up in the morning, have my prayers, and go and exercise. Say hi to my kids, have a shower, start my day, have breaks, speak to people, do coaching sessions, the family come home, spend time with them, spend time with my wife, have some fun in the evenings, say my prayers and go to bed. There's a difference even in the tonation of my voice intentionally. My days are very, very different. No one day is ever the same. Not just due to the mix of clients that I have, but even the way I show up and the way as I arrive at the day. Because I am very, very intentional about what did I want my day to look like. And I think about it from the night before. That's just how my process is. Because I want to be present. In the case of me that you're not fully here, you're not fully present. You're just going through the motion. You're just going through the responses. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Put my phone down, focus on her. I was fully there. I was fully present. That's the difference. We can go through the motions. We can have those conversations, or we can be fully there, fully present, fully locked in. And you know what that difference feels like. You know when someone fully sees you, hears you, understands you, and when someone's just going through the motions. The aim of these questions is not for you to judge yourself harshly. It's just to get you self-reflecting and guiding you towards living a more intentional life, because this is what the whole point of this is about. Life is not about the destination, but about the journey. And living a life of intentionality, the journey is meaningful. The journey is filled with joy, with laughter, with mountain tops and valley moments. It's filled with sadness. It's filled with a lot of things that are good and things that are bad. But it is purposeful. We wake up each day with a purpose. We go to bed each night with a sense of fulfillment. I can look back over my day and say, I did this today and it was a good day. I can look back over my day and say, I did this today, I did not work out yet. Even in not working out, even in that failure, there's still fulfillment. As opposed to, I look back over my day and I say to myself, what did I actually do today? Like, what did I even accomplish today? What was the point of today? That is such a waste of time. That is such a waste of a life. And yet so many of us do that day in and day out. The aim of this podcast is to encourage you. The aim of this podcast is to let you know that you have a lot more power, regardless of what your circumstances are. The choices and decisions and how you react to the circumstances are yours. The mindset that you have is what's going to determine the life that you have. I say this to my clients all the time. The mindset that you have will determine the life that you have. So whether they're dealing with things around a promotion, whether it's around a new business, whether it's around personal issues at home, your circumstances and your environment are going to be there. How are you arriving in those circumstances and environments? What thoughts are you letting feed your mind? Again, that's really important. One of the tech terms I learned from many years ago when I used to code and work in IT was GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. That's very much come alive again with the birth of, not the birth, but with AI up and then people talking about, it's about the input you put into it. But the same thing is with our minds. What are you feeding your mind? Are you feeding your mind things that help you think differently? Things that move you forward? Are you feeding your mind things that elevate your thinking? Or are you feeding your mind things that feed that doom and gloom, that powerlessness, things that feed that stress and that anxiety? You have a lot more control and a lot more choice. I hope as you're listening to this right now, you take the chance to choose a life of intentional living. Don't be a wandering generality, but be a meaningful specific. This is Everyday Leadership. We'll see you next week.